Hello and welcome to this short video tutorial about how to use the university's resources to identify psychological evidence. So identify literature that you could use to help you develop your research idea. So that could be for a research proposal assessment or your own research project in the final year. So when we're on the university's pages, what we would do is go to the students option here, and then we'd log into the student login area. So when you get to this page, what we're looking for is down here the library services button. So we click on that. So what will open are the library services page, and there are lots of useful information here. So if we click on this link here to referencing, that's where we could find all our APA American Psychological Association's guides for referencing and citing. Oh, and it's useful. If you're having any issues as you're going along, we can also use this here to help chat option with the Ask Librarians, but we won't use that for the moment. So what we're looking at really are these different options that we can use. So the first one is a very broad search option. It will look at everything from articles, books, and so on. So if you're at the very beginning of your developing your research idea and you want perhaps to get a broad feel for what's out there, this could be a useful option to start with. So perhaps we're interested in something to do with emotional intelligence, so we'll type that in. Okay, and we'll run search. So what will happen is it will search everything in terms of books, ebooks, journal articles, magazine articles, and so on. Now we might not want all of those different types of articles, so we can ask it to limit it to different types of articles, and we'll look at that in a moment. But so we have lots of ways here on the left hand side of refining our search, and also specifying particular disciplines that we want to focus on. So why might we want to do that? Well, if you look at the top here, with emotional intelligence, it's revealed over 200,000 hits, so 200,000 plus records of literature and resources. Now that's too many to go through, so we might want to refine it. So we might do that by perhaps we only want to look at for the moment journal articles, so we'll select journal articles. And a reason for focusing on journal articles are that we have the best bet of finding the most up-to-date information from a journal article because of the sort of time lag in publishing books. So if we want the really cutting-edge stuff, we're more likely to find that in a journal article than we are perhaps with books. So we'll look at journal articles for now. And we're also going to limit this search to the last 12 months, so really up-to-date information. And perhaps for now we'll decide to use the discipline of psychology. So we'll see how many of those we got. So now we've reduced this a lot to 1,000 hits, so from over 200,000 hits to only 1,000 hits. And what we can see here is this first record is looking at learning disabilities and emotional intelligence. It was published in 2017 because we've asked for it to be for only the last year, so this is published in July. And we can see here we have the full text option, so we should be able to access the full text online. The next link down perhaps is looking at emotional intelligence and creativity and so on. So what we can also think about is what specific aspect of emotional intelligence are we interested in. So there are lots of different things coming up, but perhaps we'll look at this link here, emotional intelligence and creativity, to start with. So we'll look at the full text online. So if we click on that button, it'll take us to the website. Okay, so we can see where it's been published. Let's download that. Have a look. Okay, so what we'll be looking at is one thing we can look at are actually, if we read through this article and realise this is the broad area we're interested in, emotional intelligence and creativity, something around that, then what we can look at are things called keywords. So this is a way of classifying the key aspects of the article, and what happens are each article is then indexed using these words. So these keywords can help us to identify similar articles, so articles that focus on emotional intelligence and creativity, but there could be an overlap here with empathy. So these are key features of this paper. So if we want to find more things like this paper, we could use some of the same keywords to help us narrow that down. So if we look at empathy as well, and we go back to our original search, let's type in empathy too, and then we'll refine our search. So we just have a look. So we've changed our hits, and actually now we've only gone down to just under 200 hits. So this is what you would be doing. You'd be looking at kind of playing around with the keywords based on the articles that you're interested in. So this is useful for a very broad search to start with, but it's probably not the best thing to use. Once you've got a clear idea of the topic you want to look at and your research question, this is probably not the best search option to use. So if we look back at our library page, what we can do is we can use this search option, uses the same format but looks only at journal articles and book chapters that are available online, so books, e-books and so on. This is a search for a particular journal, so if we have identified that perhaps here imagination, cognition and personality is a useful journal for us to look at for creativity, what we can do is search for it and see if we have a subscription for it or not. So we could search. So what we can see is we do have access to this. We have access to it from everything published from so March in 1999 until current. So what we can do here is access this journal and search within this journal to see if we can find more articles like the one we've had a look at. So this is a useful function as well. But what we'll look at now are the databases. Now the databases are bibliographic databases. What that means is they have indexed very large numbers of journals that you can search simultaneously in quite a structured way to help you identify articles and resources that would be useful for you. Now the one that we perhaps most often use is psycARTICLES, but so I'll type that in now. So psycARTICLES here, if we click on this, it'll take us to the bibliographic database. And what we can do is we can use these boxes here to build a more and more refined search strategy to locate the articles that we're interested that relate best to our, say, research question. So if we know we're perhaps interested in emotional intelligence, and this, you can see this is an option here, emotional intelligence, and we're interested in creativity. Again, this has come up, so creativity, and perhaps we want to, we'll start off with that and see, looking at emotional intelligence and creativity. Now what you can see under here, lots of different ways of refining your search strategy. So what this means is that Boolean phrases, it will build a search strategy. In this case we've got emotional intelligence and creativity, so we want the bibliographic database to search for articles that combine these two elements together. What we can do, if we know that we want this specifically but not something else, you could ask for it to not identify anything relating to perhaps maybe empathy. You don't want to look at that literature. So you can do a lot of, you can really be specific with your searching in this way. We can also limit to only identify the full text. We can specify the years of publications. So perhaps we want to only search for the last 5 years. So perhaps we'll look at from 2012 to 2017. And you can change all sorts of different things here. but for the moment we'll limit the results to this in this way, and we'll run search and we'll see what happens. Okay, so what we can see there is we have a very restricted sort of search. So there's only 7 hits have been identified with all of the options that we've chosen. So emotional intelligence, creativity, full text within that date range. So what we might want to do is, this one looks quite interesting here perhaps. So more obviously related to emotional intelligence and creativity. It's in the title. So what we can do is click on that link. We can read the abstract. We can see the ways that it's been indexed in the database, the subject, so creativity, emotional intelligence, cognitive process, emotions. And if we decided that this is what we wanted to look at further, we could perhaps look at changing some of our search strategies based on these keywords, these subjects. But down the left hand side you have access to the full text, because we asked for only full text options. And on the right hand side there are other things you can do. So you can look at how to cite this. We can see the APA version. Now this is not foolproof, but it's a useful thing to do. So you can export this as well. So what we can do is export this citation. If we're using a reference manager such as Mendeley, which is a free reference manager, we can export the citation into Mendeley and store it there. So there's a lot we can do. Okay. But if we go back to our results list, perhaps we've been a bit restricted in terms of our date range. So perhaps we'll open that up a bit and we'll say for the last 10 years instead of only sort of 5. We'll update that, see what happens. Okay, so we've only found another couple of articles here, so we might need to play around with these things. So perhaps it's emotional intelligence, but there is an overlap between emotional intelligence and empathy. So perhaps we'll use some Boolean logic here. What we'll do is we'll say we want emotional intelligence or empathy. And creativity. So we want either emotional intelligence or empathy and creativity to be searched for. So we'll run search again, see what happens. Okay, so this has increased it. So there's a little bit more now we can draw on. So what you're doing when you're looking for evidence, for psychological evidence, is you're looking at the keywords you're using, thinking about how that relates to your research question, looking to see if there are synonyms you can use. So things like sometimes if you're looking at something in relation to gender, some research may talk about gender, others might talk about sex, for example, sex differences or something like that. So are there synonyms that you can use that could expand it if you're not finding enough information with the search you're using currently? If you're finding too many hits, so very large numbers, how can you perhaps restrict your search to make it more specific? So what you're doing is trying to get the balance between pulling up those articles that are directly relevant to your research question, but not restricting it either. So it's the balance between including too much or not enough. And what you're doing is looking at, for example, the keywords, to help guide you with that in the articles you have identified, using that to help guide you. There are other bibliographic databases you can use. So if we go back to the guides, another important one is called Academic Search Complete. So if we search for this, you found it here. And it's sometimes useful it looks the same, but it's a different bibliographic database. It's useful to search multiple resources because they index different journals. So it might be that you find different types of information. So let's try this again. So we'll look at emotional intelligence. and we'll look at creativity, and we'll ask for only full text, but we won't apply a restricted date range for this. We'll just run search. Okay, so it may be that we've identified here some different articles from the other bibliographic database. So yes, so we've identified one that we didn't see in the other bibliographic database that was published only sort of a year or so ago, and we might be looking at this, and again it's trying to make sure you've got that right balance between inclusion and exclusion with your literature. Now, looking back at these examples, so we've looked at some of these. What we can also do is use something that's outside of our university resources. I'm just going to open a new tab. And one thing that's useful is called Google Scholar. So if I just type in Scholar, click on this here. So this is Google Scholar. Now, again, this is a useful starting point. So these are some of my perhaps recent searches. What I'll look for is I'll type in emotional intelligence and creativity, and I'll see what comes up. Okay, so we've got quite a huge number of hits, so over 360,000. We can see links. If you're signed in, you can see links to where we have full text options. These are also links that have the article published on, freely available on other resources. So things like ResearchGate, academia.edu. Quite often you can, if you sign up and have an account, then which is free, you can access research articles that way. So we'll look for only those articles published in the last year. So again, this might be a good starting point. So that's something that we've identified in the past, this link between emotional intelligence and creativity. Another useful thing to look at here is something called related articles. So what we can do is check this. These are all articles that are related to in some way this top one here. You can also see articles that are cited by other ones. So if this was very useful, what we could see here is a cited by, so this one's been used in other people's research. And we could look at these articles. Are there anything in here that is useful for us as well? And so on. So that's a useful thing to look at. So these are just some ways of identifying some literature. It's all about the keywords that you're using. So think carefully about those, write them down, think about all the synonyms of a word that could be relevant, and help build a really good search strategy so that you've got that balance between including the things that are directly relevant but not excluding them either, so you're getting that right balance. And what you'll need to do is just usually adjust your search strategy. So pilot it, see how it goes. If you're finding way too much or not enough, then you need to rethink it slightly. Okay, hopefully that's been useful. If you have any queries about this, it might also be worth getting in touch with our academic liaison librarian. So they run help desks, and you can also arrange book tutorials and discuss with them issues you're having when searching for literature. Our academic liaison librarian is Catherine Devine. Okay, so if you get in touch with her, then she can also help you if you're having particular difficulties tracking down literature. Okay, thank you.